On this Community Wednesday, we'll be breaking down the DMR 14. Just like the FAL last week, the DMR was an extremely meta weapon when it first came out. It allowed you to two-shot anyone from basically any distance, and this made an extremely annoying meta. As soon as the DMR and the Type 63 got nerfed though, nobody seemed to use them anymore. So, are they worth using now, since a lot of the other weapons have been nerfed, and the DMR and the Type 63 have been untouched? Let's find out. But before we get into its stats, let's talk about the recommended build. In this build, we're using the Agency Silencer, the 20.8-inch Task Force, Axial Arms, 3x Optic, Field Agent foregrip, and the 30-round mags. Just to let you guys know, I was asked to use a version with a 4x optic and a specific reticle, and while it is completely usable, I believe the one with the 3x is the best all-around weapon, and since this is the recommended build, this is what I'm recommending. But I will talk about the 4x optic and that specific reticle later in the video. So let's get into its stats, starting with mobility. Its ADS time is 330 milliseconds, which is pretty high, but average for a Cold War long-range assault rifle. Its reload and reload add times are 3.19 seconds and 2.27 seconds, so you're almost saving a full second if you leave one bullet in the magazine. And its mag cap is 30, and honestly, this is all you need. Its movement and sprint speeds are great because, of course, this is a Cold War weapon. And its ADS strafe speed is 1.77 meters per second, which isn't great, but this is average for long-range assault rifles. And its sprint out and tac sprint out are 260 and 380 milliseconds, which are average. Its stability is 1.25 T, which is great for a long-range weapon. However, its bullet velocity is only 869.5 meters per second, which is not very good for long-range engagements, especially when it's semi-auto. And to make things worse, its rate of fire is 6.5 rounds per second, so this is extremely unforgiving. When we add up the numbers, we get a mobility score of 31. Its recoil is quite manageable, and as I've tested more semi-auto weapons, I'm led to believe that semi-auto weapons have a different recoil randomization than full auto ones. However, if you're spam firing, you can definitely hit targets up to 60 meters without missing, and this is great because your bullet velocity is still pretty good at that point. But things get weird when you try to use the 4x optic. If you start spam firing, it's not going to let you hit your target or track it very well because it has a lot more visual recoil. However, if the target is still, you can definitely reach much further than with the 3x. We'll talk more about the 4x later, but with the 3x, it gets a recoil score of 35. As for damage, well, it's pretty good, and it gets even better at longer ranges. In the first damage range, so under 28 meters, if you hit headshots only, you'll get an amazing time to kill, with only 3 shots to kill as well. But more likely, you're going to be getting upper torso, lower torso, and limb shots, so 615 milliseconds is pretty average. However, if you get 1 headshot, you'll bring yourself down to 4 shots to kill, and this would be really great. If you miss a shot, your TTK will go up dramatically, so while it may seem attractive to get at least 1 headshot, I would just aim for upper torso and lower torso shots, because it's much safer and you're guaranteed to kill anyways. Plus, you should be using an SMG as a backup anyways. However, in the second damage range, its headshot and upper torso TTKs are great. Its lower torso and limb TTKs are average, but you're pretty much always guaranteed to get a 5-shot kill. And at any range past 30 meters, this is extremely great. Technically, you can get a 4-shot kill if you hit 1 headshot, 2 upper torso shots, and 1 lower torso shot, but realistically, that's probably not going to happen very often, especially with the visual recoil and things getting a bit harder to use at longer ranges. But 5 shots still is a great TTK. So it gets a damage score of 75. And when we add up all the categories, we get a final score of 141. This happens to be the exact score that the FAL got, and it's pretty easy to see why. The DMR 14 is basically a slightly more mobile FAL, and while in its separate TTKs it does have less potential in its first damage range, in the second damage range, it has a higher potential, especially because you can always get a 5-shot kill unless you're aiming really, really low. Another thing that the DMR 14 has over the FAL is its slower rate of fire. And this is actually a good thing at longer ranges, because with the FAL, you have to spam that trigger in order to get that high rate of fire. But with the DMR 14, you're probably going to be hitting that fire rate cap extremely easily, which means you can put more effort into tracking your targets rather than trying to see how fast you can click. The DMR14 is also a lot more accurate at longer ranges and is easier to control. This technically does make this a better long-range option. The DMR14 though does not get the same performance in its first damage range as the FAL. So an FAL is probably going to beat a DMR14 because the DMR has to get at least one headshot, while the FAL can hit a mix of upper torso, lower torso, or headshots and still get a great TTK. And because the FAL has a higher rate of fire, it's more suitable for close to medium range because you can probably afford to miss one shot. So how to use the DMR14? Well, it's a pretty good medium range weapon. Because of its extremely great long range TTKs, between 30 and 80 meters, you'll pretty much be destroying most other weapons. However, things get a bit different once they go past 80 meters. After that, you're going to have to start tap firing, and any full auto weapon will start to gain an advantage because they don't have to tap fire, they can just hold the trigger and look for the hit markers. And not to mention, because of a higher rate of fire, you're going to be flinching a lot more, so it'll be harder to get back on target. And if you hit them, yes, they may also flinch, but because it's got a slower rate of fire and you are tap firing, they're probably going to be back on target before you fire your next shot. Plus, once you pass 90 meters, you're going to have to start leading targets and accounting for bullet drop, which most other weapons won't have to do. After 90 meters, you're going to find it extremely difficult to engage most moving targets. So back to the 4x optic. Yes, it is a really great tool to zoom in a lot more. However, it doesn't have the same recoil reduction properties as the 3x optic. The 3x actually reduces your vertical and horizontal recoil, while the 4x really seems to only reduce your horizontal recoil. And I've made at least 2 videos about this before. The more zoom you have, the more recoil you'll have to account for. And I don't mean actual recoil with your gun, but your felt recoil, how much you have to pull down on your mouse or your stick. With the 3x, while you may not clearly see your target at all times, you can spam fire it, and if you're relatively accurate, you will be hitting your shots, even though you can't see them that well. But with the 4x, you're going to have a lot of visual recoil, so that means you cannot spam fire with the 4x efficiently. This means that you'll have to start using the DMR14 as more of a marksman rifle and go for headshots and try to get that 3-shot kill. However, the DMR14 isn't really suitable for this role since it doesn't have the bullet velocity, so you'll have to be accounting for bullet drop and leading your targets if they're moving. People with sniper rifles and long-range assault rifles won't have this problem. They just can keep you centered and down you before you can fire your 3rd shot. If you get used to the bullet drop and you actually know how much you have to lead your shots at extremely long ranges, then good, but that would take a long time to actually learn that. And I have no doubt that someone could learn how to do it because I learned how to use the Holger at long ranges as well. So it just takes a long time to learn these things. But then we have the FAL with a slightly worse realistic long-range TTK and slightly worse recoil, but when you're tap firing, it does have a way better bullet velocity, so you would be able to use the FAL at much longer ranges. The problem with the DMR14 is the same problem with all tactical rifles from Cold War. The way that they nerfed them, they just destroyed their bullet velocities, so that they're basically impossible to compete at longer ranges. I'm not saying that the DMR14 is a bad weapon though. Between 30 and 80 meters, this thing is really great. The main reason I've been saying a lot of negative things about the DMR14 in this video is because if I would only say the positive things about it, it would seem like it's really, really great. And while it is a good gun, it's a little too niche for most people. Remember, the reason why the Krig and Farah and even technically the C58 are so widely used is because they're really easy to use for a new player or a skilled player, and they still are extremely competitive at pretty much all ranges. The DMR14 is just a little too niche right now. However, if they buff its bullet velocity, then we may have a contender for a great long-range weapon. But if they do buff its bullet velocity, they will have to turn down its headshot damage because it'll just be like the FAL, and that's exactly what they did to it. Now, a final word on the choice of reticle. I think that reticle that was recommended to me is fine. However, it's very clean, and it's actually a little better in my opinion for close range targets. With longer range targets, I prefer to have straight lines, so I know exactly how much to compensate for vertically and horizontally when I'm leading my targets. And sure, you could memorize and take guesses, but I like to be a little more precise. So that's why I would recommend the more crosshair style of reticle rather than an open one like this. But that's the DMR 14. I've used it since it got nerfed, and what did you think about it? And that's the video. If you enjoyed it or it's helped you in any way, let me know by leaving a like. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section down below, and if you want to make sure that you never miss another video, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.